Hello everyone and welcome to this beginner's guide into the world of Dash 3D. In this tutorial we'll be creating this scene here and we will be learning the basics in Dash Studio. Part 1 will cover the user interface, so where everything is in Dash Studio, how to add a figure and an environment, how to morph a figure, how to change the pose of a figure, and how to move a figure around in the scene. So let's get started. So when we load up Dash Studio, we are greeted with this welcome screen. We can just click on OK because we don't need that. And then you're probably looking around thinking, where do I begin? So you've got all these tabs here, all these tools here. What do they all mean? How do I create my scene? So over here, we've got what is called the viewport, which is where the main area where all your characters, your props and your backgrounds will be placed when you put them. Now I think the best way to show you is to actually add a figure and kind of get started. So what we'll do is we'll go to the smart content and make sure products is selected. You've got products and you've got files. So with the files, you've got all the different files associated with this, with all the categories here. And then with products they're basically filtered down. So you've got all the products associated with all these categories. So for us to add a character, we need to go to figures, and here you can see all the different figures I've got, all the different characters. So we can ignore these for now because the version of Dash Studio that you have do not have all these characters. And the one we're looking for is Genesis 8 Starter Essentials. You double click that, and then what you get is all these items that are associated with Genesis 8 Starter Essentials are in here. So if you click on figures again, you can see you've got Genesis 8 Basic Female and Genesis 8 Basic Male. Now a quick point about Genesis 8 is they are the best high quality characters, figures that Dash Studio have at the moment. Their skin is realistic skin and their textures are very, very good. So whenever you're creating any scenes, you should always use Genesis 8 characters. They're the best at the moment. And what we're going to do now is add a basic female character. So we're going to double click this, and Dash Studio will go ahead and load this. So now what happens is every time you import a character or load a character, they will always have no clothes on. Don't ask me why, that's just the way it is. And they're always in this what is called the zero pose. So this is like the basic default zero pose for any character you add into your scene, whether it's male, female, cat, dog. Actually, I'm not sure about cat and dog. Well, even maybe dragons have their basic, animals have their basic basic poses. So what we'll do now is we'll add some clothes. So if you click here, wardrobe, where the clothes are. So these are all the clothes associated with this character. So what we'll do is we'll use this basic wear 01, double click the clothes. Now the clothes will automatically fit the character. You don't need to do anything to make the clothes fit, which is great. And we'll give our figure some hair. So if you click on hair, and we'll double click the Toulouse hair. Great. Okay, so we've got our character in our viewport or in our scene. And so how do we navigate around that scene? How do we navigate in the viewport? So over here you've got like the orbit tool. If you keep your left mouse button pressed down and then move your mouse, you can see that you're moving your character around and we're orbiting around the scene. So we're actually moving our character around, we're not actually moving the camera per se. And then here you've got the orbit tool again. I'm not too sure why it's there twice. These two tools seem to do the same thing. It's there, but this does the same thing. Just to show you, keep my left mouse button pressed and I'm moving my character around the scene. The next one is the pan tool. So keep your left mouse button pressed. If I move to the right, my character moves to the right. If I move my mouse to the left, the character moves to the left. And if I move my mouse up, my character move up. And if I move down, the character moves down. The next tool is the zoom in tool. So if I keep my left mouse button pressed and move my mouse up, it will move my character move further away. If I move my mouse down, my character will move towards the screen, get bigger. You can do the same thing with your mouse wheel. So if I just put my mouse in the actual viewport and then roll my mouse up, my character will move further away. And if I roll my mouse down, my mouse wheel down, it will move closer to the screen. And the next tool after that is the framing tool. So as you can see these kind of like lines, and these are like framing lines. When I click that, the scene will automatically frame in on my character. So, like so. And the next thing is this one here, is the reset button. So imagine if you got lost in your scene. Do that now very quickly. So I got lost in my scene, I don't know where I am, etc. If I press this tool here, click on this tool, it will automatically take me back to the default kind of default camera view basically, and you can find your character again. Right, the next thing we'll do is move on to the different views. So we've got perspective view here. So this view is just basically we're allowed to move freely around in the scene. That's what perspective view is. And then you've got other views. So you've got front view, which is literally just the front view. We can't, in these views, the front view, the left view, the right view, the back view, the top view, and the bottom view, we can't use the orbit tool. It doesn't work. We can pan. We can zoom in, zoom out, and we can frame. That's all we can do with that. So you would probably use these views, left view, right view, top view, bottom view, if you wanted to check something in particular. But I generally don't use those views. I just generally use the perspective view. And then obviously when you create a camera, which we'll do later on in this tutorial, I would just use those really. Okay, so the next one is the different drawing styles. So these are the different drawing styles. We are currently in texture shaded mode. So these are different drawing styles. I'll go through them very quickly. So we've got wire bounding box. Not particularly helpful maybe there. We've got solid bounding box. Probably not particularly helpful as well. Got wireframe. Got lit wireframe. So with the lit wireframe, you can see where the actual light is affecting character. Got wire shaded, smooth shaded, wire texture shaded, cartoon shaded. That's what they will look like. And then the main one here, NVIDIA Iray. So when we click NVIDIA Iray, what happens is DAZ Studio will start to create a preview of what your image will look like if you press the render button when you're going to render your actual scene, create your scene. It will show you like a preview. This shouldn't take too long, hopefully. There we go. So obviously, the more characters you have, the more props you have, the more kind of background lights, etc. you have, it takes longer to create this preview. As we only just have one figure, it hasn't taken that long to really create that figure, create the preview. Sorry. There's our preview, as you can see. And we can zoom in. Okay. Again. Right, so the main ones I use, the main draw styles that I use are texture shaded and the NVIDIA Iray. You can use the other draw styles. For example, if you got loads of props in your scene, lots of characters, etc., it does get very slow, even with the texture shaded, to kind of orbit and move around the scene. So sometimes you would possibly use one of these other ones, other draw styles, just to to navigate around the scene a lot quicker. And the last one here up here is the viewport options menu. So these are kind of like the default ones. So you've got cube view controls, which is docked view. So basically your view is docked like this, which I don't particularly like. We'll leave it in the default. Cube view, we'll leave it the cube view default way. Show floor, so obviously if you get rid of it, the floor goes away, so I would recommend you leave that on. Show center axis, so that's like the middle of the actual scene. I don't really use. Show aspect frame, so this is the actual frame of your, so if you were going to create your actual image, your render, you're going to render your image, this is the actual bit where the rendering would take place. Anything outside of this would not be rendered. It will not be created. Off. So thirds guide. So thirds guide is something you would use when you are framing your scene, framing your character, which I'll explain in more detail when we actually create our character later on in this tutorial. Create our camera later on in this tutorial. Show pose tool. So if I say, for example, clicked on, I don't know, the arm here, you can see the pose tool is here, and you can move that particular part of your character, which I won't do now. So we leave that normally. Hide camera cube, so that will just cube. Then you've got the auto hide and auto control. We'll leave those. We'll leave everything as it is, just not really needed. Okay, so I think I've bored you enough. Sorry, I'm gonna have to bore you a little bit more. So over here we've got the scene tab, which is probably the second most important part of the user interface. So here we've got Genesis 8 female. Obviously when you select it, it will turn orange, and then you would obviously have this framing around it. So if we go through the tools here very quickly, you've got the visibility option. So if I click on this, we'll turn it off, and your character hides basically. I'll explain why the hair and the clothes haven't disappeared. You'll see why in a bit. So if you put that back on. The next bit is the selection tool. So what this does is when I move my mouse over the character, you see like it highlights certain parts of the body. So what we can do is, for example, when you have a scene, or if you're very close up to a character and you're trying to frame, say for example the face, frame the face, and when you're trying to do certain things, it's kind of distracting sometimes. So what you would normally do is you would click on that selection tool, and now when I move my mouse around say for example the head is, because the head is not saying you don't select the head. When I move my mouse, it doesn't select the head, so sometimes it is a bit distracting. So you can always turn that off. So I've gone a bit ahead of myself actually. Frame that again. Okay, so when I click on this tool here, it will collapse all the items associated with our Genesis 8 female. So here you can see you've got hip, which I'll explain in a bit. You've got the eyelashes, you've got the bra, you've got the panties, and you use hair. So remember when I got rid of hid the actual body, the items were still there. Here you can see if I click on these now, they will disappear. Okay. I'll put them on. Here you've got hip. So if I click on hip, it shows you, it kind of drop down menu of everything associated with the different kind of bones associated with that character. So if I click on pelvis, you'll see the framing is now around the pelvis. You can literally go through here and kind of navigate your way through. It's not the best way. If you wanted to, for example, just get straight to say this shin here, this area here, you just click on it and it will automatically take you to that part of the bone part of that character's bone there. Character's anatomy, sorry. Okay, if we just Right, I think I've bored you enough, so let's get cracking with the actual, with our scene. So let's add our backdrop. So if we go to add a backdrop, because we've got our character selected, there's no actual backdrop here or environment section. Just say environment, there isn't there. So if I click off that and go back here, you'll see environments. Okay, click on environments, and I think the one you will have is this one here, Secret Garden, Shaded Haven. Double click that, then we're going to add our pergola. Double click. Okay, and then what I'm going to do now is just going to click on NVIDIA iRay to render our, have a quick preview just to see what it looks like. creating our render. I'm sure you're watching this and you probably noticed the mistake already. This bit here, if you have a look, the feet are in the ground. We will fix that. I'll show you to fix that. But sometimes when you do add an environment, your character will probably like lose some part of an anatomy. It's just the way it is sometimes. It's just the way Dash Studio works sometimes, but we can fix that very easily. So as you can see here, look, I'm moving my mouse around and it's all yellow and that's quite distracting. So if I click on Pergola and then click on this bit here to deselect everything, when I move my mouse, it won't select everything. Now you're probably wondering, why is it white? Why is the background white? Well, the reason why it's white is because Dash Studio hasn't loaded any textures or any materials associated with this pergola. So if we go to the material section here, click on that, you can see all the different materials associated with that actual environment. Now to make it easy, you double click this full pergola matte, it will automatically add all the associated materials, all the associated props associated with that environment, and we won't have to do anything. And now it will start rendering, start creating a preview, very soon, I hope. Do that. There we go. Okay, and there we go. Now obviously her feet are still stuck and we're going to fix that now. So what I like to do is always come out of NVIDIA Iray and always go into texture shade, because I don't want to slow anything down, because sometimes when you start moving your character, it's a bit slow and a bit jerky, and I don't like that. We go back to shaded. Go. But make sure I click on my character, because I want to change the settings on my character, so make sure that's highlighted. And if I go to parameters, and you can see we've got here transforms. So these are the different ways you can move your character around in the scene. So if, for example, I wanted to move my character on the x-axis, keep my left mouse button pressed. If I move to the right, my character moves to the right. If I move to the left, my character moves. Okay, I will just reset that. So I want my character to move up, which is Y translate, and I want a positive number. I want it to move up is positive. So I right click and I move, left click button and move my mouse to the right. Now you don't want to move your character all the way up like this, like she's floating, because that's a bit strange. It's not very realistic. So what you want to do is you want to have your character just slightly above there, so it's kind of like touching on the ground, so it looks a bit more realistic. Okay, and we'll let go of that. So now our character's feet are visible, which is great. Okay, so one thing I forgot to do was to do the actual morphing, but we can do that now, it's not a problem. So morphing is just a fancy way of saying I want to change the shape of my character. I want to maybe make my character bigger, smaller, make them look more athletic, muscular, make them maybe look a bit overweight, whatever you choose to do. So to do this, we have to make sure our character is selected, which it is. We go to shaping tab, the shaping tab, click on that, and we go to actor, and then you'll see these options here in your free version. You'll see bodybuilder, bodybuilder details, and bodybuilder size. So what I normally do is push that setting all the way up 100, and you can see that she's got like abs, some slight muscular definition. And these ones, you can see when I move it all the way up, she gets bigger, bigger size, bigger muscles. That's up to you what you want to choose. I normally leave it pretty low. And you got a bodybuilder here, which gives you more kind of like a bodybuilder aesthetic look. I normally leave that pretty. Okay, so we've done our morphing. That's quite straightforward. Obviously, I will dig into morphing a bit more when we do other tutorial videos, but for this basic thing, it's fine. Right, the next thing we're going to do is to add a pose. So at the moment, this looks kind of boring. The normal kind of zero pose is kind of boring. So what we're going to do is go back here and then go to poses. And as you can see, I've got all poses here. So ignore all these, you don't get all these. Genesis 8 start essential poses, and here we go. So these are all the kind of like poses, the preset poses that come with the actual free version of DAZ Studio. So these poses are some of that have been created, and you just double click and then your character will automatically go into that pose. So the one we want is this one here, base pose kneeling A. Double click that and you can see our character automatically goes into that pose. And characters in that pose, great. Just going to zoom in and check back. So always, and a quick tip is to, when you always do a pose, just check to make sure everything is okay. Sometimes some poses will kind of change the way, would change maybe too much and it doesn't look very natural, and you will have to actually automatically change. You would have to actually change, for example, you know, you may not like the arm, where the arm is, you might have to change that and kind of adjust the pose to taste your suit your taste, sorry. Okay, so we zoom out, that looks good to me. And what I'm going to do now is I want my character to kind of move here, because obviously when we're adding our our lights in, I want to get a bit more light in. So I'm going to move my character forward. So make sure it's selected, and that would be the Z translate. So to move my character towards the screen, I would have to use a positive number. So left click, hold the left mouse button, move it to the right. My character will move. So I want to move my character around about here is fine. Doesn't have to be perfect. Hand tool. There. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is actually move the head. I don't like where his head is kind of looking away. So I'm going to click on my head character. And you can see now, look, the head is selected. And now I can move the actual specific parts of the head. So I can bend the head. So that will basically move my head up and down. So positive number, move it down. Negative number, move it up. I can twist the head. So obviously negative number, move it to the left. And positive number, move it to the right. I want to the left as possible. So there. And then obviously you can move it side to side. So positive number, move left. Yeah. Negative number, move. So it's up to you how you want to choose, how much you want to choose the head. I mean, it doesn't really matter. It's up to you how you want to change the default pose. I think that looks pretty good. Let's do a quick render. Click here, video array. Let's see how that looks. Okay, so there's our render. Looks pretty good. And remember, the reason why it hasn't rendered everything is because the aspect frame, there we go. So you can see the aspect frame, nothing outside of this frame will get rendered. Basically, it's just whatever's inside this frame. That's why it looks like that. Right, that looks good. Back to shaded. Okay, so what we're going to do now is save this, because we're coming to the end of this tutorial of part 1. So file, save, and then I want to save it as tutorial 1. Actually, we'll save it as part 1. Save, and that's our scene saved. Okay, excellent. So I always recommend regularly always save your work, because DAZ Studio sometimes does crash. It's very rare, but it does crash. I've had it happen where it's crashed and I've lost all my scene and everything, and I've had to start all over again, which is really annoying. Which is very annoying indeed, as you can imagine, when you've got loads of props and characters in your scene. Right, I hope you enjoyed this part 1 of this tutorial. What I recommend is you create a new scene. You can do that by going File, New, and then add the male Genesis 8 male character, add another backdrop, have a go at morphing that character, you know, changing the shape, have a go at changing the pose, so add a default pose, and then have a go at moving the different body parts or to the different body parts, and really have a go at just experimenting while part 2 gets ready. And in part 2, what we'll be looking at in part 2 is we'll be adding our own camera, so we'll be actually framing our scene. We will be obviously adding our lights to enhance the scene, and we will be obviously rendering our scene, so actually creating the finished image where you can see what it looks like. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and look forward to seeing you in part 2.